Chapter 9. Color Tonics. As music has its tonic, mediant, and dominant notes represented in their order by the first, third, and fifth notes of the octave, so color has its fundamental or tonic in the red, its mediant in the yellow, and its dominant in the blue. All the secondary colors being but reflections and refractions of the three primaries. Very few people who have investigated the subjects of sound and color will take other than the position that there must be a very intimate relationship between the two. While there are many things that have not been made satisfactorily clear to the minds of investigators, nevertheless, we know that after sound vibration ceases, as far as the human ear is concerned, vibration still continues, and that 34 octaves from the ending of what we are pleased to call sound vibrations, we find the beginning of the first note in the octave of color. The interesting fact that there is an instrument used by the blind to hear light, to which I have referred in another chapter, would seem to establish beyond all doubt that the principal difference between light and sound color is simply a question of vibration. Some years ago I knew a little girl who, whenever she heard a selection played on the piano or other musical instrument, would designate it by some color, calling one piece blue, another red, and still another yellow. In fact, using all the colors to designate the different compositions. It was a peculiar fact that she never made a mistake in referring to the colors of the various selections. A piece once red was always red, and this was accounted for by her statement that as she listened to each one she saw its color. Many times she was tested to see whether she would not make some mistake, but she never did. Each had its own particular color, and no other. Even after she had grown to womanhood, she still declared she saw color connected with all the music to which she listened. This question of color in its relation to sound might prove one of great interest to the student, but my object in dealing with it in this case is to bring out something of practical value. In the healing of the sick, I give music the chief place of importance, but I look upon color as a necessary adjunct to it, and believe that its use may greatly enhance the value of music. Just as I write this chapter, I have, before my vision, a beautiful green lawn, and at the end of the lawn a great clump of rose bushes, covered with a profusion of beautiful red roses. As I sit on the ground, I notice two things. That the green lawn brings to me something of a very restful state of mind, but if I look at the roses for any length of time I find that the mind becomes more active, because red is a real tonic to both mental and physical activity. It is the color red that corresponds to blood, to life, and red really symbolizes life. On its lowest octave, red represents, first of all, physical life with all its activities. We have every reason to believe that it was the first color caught by the eye of man, or, rather, it was the first color to which man became attuned, and all color which the eye has since been able to see has been gradual in its unfolding. There is a necessary state, or condition, in the life of man, that must come into being before he can respond to all the notes in the first great octave of color. For color has its octaves in the same way that sound has octaves. But we have at present more than 10 octaves of sound, and only one of color. We have certain colors which we call warm or luminous, red, orange, yellow, and light green. But in the new octave of color, we shall find much more of the luminous than we are able to perceive at the present. Higher rates of vibration will add very greatly to the wonder of the spectrum. I am inclined to think that the lover of color gradually comes to see more and more in every tint and hue, more tone and more of the harmony that nature produces in her marvelous combinations of color. People who need to have their physical activities awakened will find much that will be helpful in the varying degrees and the tones of the color red, more or less modified by combination with certain other colors, for to many people, red would serve only to excite, without benefiting. We know that red produces a very distinct antagonism in some animals. It stirs them to destructive effort and, to some degree, this holds good in regard to some people. It so works upon the emotional nature that only superficial emotions are awakened. Undoubtedly, red serves to awaken more of the subconsciousness of man's purely physical or elemental life than any other single color. The color red, like certain kinds of music, inspires men to battle. The people who wish to overthrow the existing order of things choose a red flag in preference to one of any other color. Red, being the fundamental color, should, when people are rightly adjusted to it, be constructive. But, through failure to adjust, red represents, to a very marked degree, the destructive side of life. With the beginning of a new octave, in which red will again be the tonic or fundamental note, there will come with it in human life greater vitality and a far greater degree of constructiveness. Red represents, in a very decided way, energy and motion, but it is well to remember that energy and motion should be of an orderly action, and red can only get its balance in connection with yellow, the mediant note in color, and blue, the dominant note. What is needed is balance. Yellow, standing between red and blue, produces the balance that should of necessity exist. Yellow stands, in this relation, representative of thought and reason. We might say that it relates man on one side to that which is of the earth, earthy, and on the other side to that which is of the heavens, heavenly. It represents thought and reason. It may be truly said to be representative of the mind of man. The color yellow inspires thought, therefore it is not so restful to the mind as green or blue. It plays practically the same part in the mental that red does in the physical life. It stirs to a new condition of activity, the activity of the mental plane. Between the vibrations of red, the first note, and yellow, the third note, there comes into being the second note. We might say that red is the father and yellow the mother, and orange is the child. And the child partakes of the qualities of both father and mother. It is the color which establishes the equilibrium between the first and the third note, as, in a greater way, equilibrium is established by the mediant or third note between the first and the fifth. As yellow is related, on one side, to spirit and on the other to matter, so orange is related to the physical and the mental, and in its uses for the healing of the sick, these two factors must be taken into consideration. With some people it has enough of red in it to stir them to physical activity, and with others it has enough of the yellow to stir to mental activity. I feel certain that means will be found to combine music and color in a thoroughly scientific way, so that color may work in harmony with music for the healing of every kind of sickness. But it will be essential to discover the effect of color on the mind and the emotions of people, just as it will be necessary to know the kind of music to give, according to the temperament and the needs of the patient. People at different times have reached what seemed to them satisfactory conclusions concerning the beneficial action of color on human life. Some 30 years ago we had what was known as the blue glass craze, when it was thought that all kinds of diseases were going to be healed through the use of the blue ray. Practical experience gave little, if any, result. People may say this proves that color is of little benefit, if any, in the healing of the sick, but I do not think it proves anything of the kind. We do not get music simply by sounding one note of a chord, but rather through a combination of notes, and healing will not come from any one color, but rather from the combining of the colors. There are major and minor chords in color, just as much as there are in music, and these major and minor chords are going to affect people in different ways and degrees. That which will prove a real tonic for one person may not have a beneficial effect upon another. In every case, there must be a thorough diagnosis of the patient's needs, and the correspondence for these needs should be found both in music and in color. If music and color are to be used for the healing of the sick, then they will only accomplish a real good when they are used in thoroughly scientific ways. Many experiments may have to be tried before those scientific ways are discovered, but it is through experiment that, eventually, the truth is established. Between the yellow and the blue we have green. The light green that lies close to the yellow in the spectrum is the last of the luminous or warm colors. It takes its warmth very largely from the yellow. The dark green, which comes nearest to blue, is a light-absorbing color. Perhaps, of all colors, green is the most soothing and quieting. If a person has been under great excitement or intense strain, the medium or the dark greens will produce a more restful and relaxing condition than any of the other colors. Blue is the fifth, or dominant note in color. It represents more of what may be called man's spiritual consciousness than any other of the preceding notes. In the spectroscope it shades from its lightest tint into indigo. It is called a non-luminous color, and also a cold color. Lord Rayleigh said that the blue color of the sky is due to the scattering of light by small, suspended particles and air molecules which are most effective in the case of shorter waves. The green color of seawater near the shore is also due to a scattering of light. The scattering of light has its perfect correspondence in that blue represents such qualities as truth, faith, and hope. We might call it the color that diffuses light, and, while we may call it a cold color, it has in its nature the restfulness that tends to make one more receptive to the real inner life. It is cold in comparison with red and orange, but it is a real life-giving color. We might say that it is the first real color that brings man into closer relationship with the things that are not seen. Blue stands essentially for truth, and it is the truth that makes for freedom. Sometimes we speak of a man as being true blue, that is, a man who is to be thoroughly trusted. Within the last few years, we have heard much about the wonderful effects of ultraviolet rays, the color not as yet seen by our organs of sight, yet apparently possessing more chemical power than the whole octave of color below it. Already it has been found that it can be put to use for destructive ends and purposes in a way in which no other color can be used. It is a singular thing that man so often turns his discoveries in nature to destructive ends before he finds out their higher and better uses. Though the ultraviolet ray carries within itself the power to destroy, later it will be found that its energy can be used for thoroughly constructive purposes. If the opening note in a new octave of color contains so much power, how much more power is the whole octave likely to reveal? And this only symbolizes the power that is resident in the life of man when he is able to hear and to perceive that which at one time was thought to be unattainable. For the unattainable is only so to a partial consciousness. To the full consciousness, all things become possible. All things are ours when we know how to use them. For man will sooner or later lay hold of the fruits of the tree of life, and eat thereof, and live forever. Bright violet is one of the most spiritual of colors. On one side it draws from the indigo, and on the other from the invisible red. The first note, as it were, in the new octave of color. Indigo is considered one of the most enduring of colors, while violet fades more quickly than any other, and the reason for this is that violet, being the last note in the first octave of color, draws quite as much from the invisible red as it does from the indigo. There is a new octave of color that some people are beginning to perceive dimly. In one way, in this new octave, all the colors are the same, just as we have the same notes in each octave of music, but any given note of the next octave above requires twice the number of vibrations to produce it. So it will eventually be found that the color red and all the succeeding colors of a new octave of color will have their vibrations redoubled, and the intensity of the vibration in its new octave will add much to the life-giving power of color. Let me sum up, in a brief way, the effect of color on the mind and consequently on the body. Red tends to excite to activity, so that people who are sensitive and excitable should avoid the use of this color. Orange, in a lesser way, produces similar effects. These two colors more nearly represent the elemental side of life. Yellow, to a degree, would excite to mental activity, but that activity is not expressed through the physical to the same degree as red or orange. Green, in its varying shades, is really the most soothing and restful of all colors. The very lightest shades of green that come under the head of luminous colors are not so restful as the darker shades. But the luminous shades of green may often be used to quicken the mentality of sensitive-minded people who have become mentally morbid or sluggish. Some shades of blue are very restful. They seem to call out something of the inner rest and peace of life, but the darker shades tend toward making one mentally and physically torpid. The darker shades of blue might be of great help to one who was hysterical or highly excited. Many physicians advise that the rooms of their patients be kept darkened. Others go to the other extreme and are in favor of a great deal of light. It seems to me that good judgment must be exercised in the use of light. In diseases accompanied by fever or mental excitement, the light should be of a soft or subdued nature, while in many kinds of chronic diseases, where mind and body are both sluggish and vitality is low, great light is needed to stir to greater activity of mind and body. Too much light of a glaring nature is not good for even a healthy person. It is apt to induce mental restlessness and physical languor. I have carefully noted the effects of light and heat in Italy and Florida. The Italian people during the summer do comparatively little work in the middle of the day, many of them resting for several hours before returning to their business or work. In this way, they seem to be able to accomplish more than the people who continue to work throughout the day. I have known very wide-awake and energetic people who have gone from New England to Florida, and for a time they have been able to keep up their mental and physical activities for the same number of hours as they had formerly done in the north. But after a time they grew mentally sluggish and physically inactive. Possibly, If they had used the same methods that the Italians use, this condition need never have arisen. The fact of the matter is that temperance in everything is necessary for the best mental and physical poise. The Italian, when he goes home at noontime, goes there for repose, for rest, so that later he may take up his work and carry it on in a vigorous way. The curtains and blinds are all closed on the sunny side of his house, and the windows are open on the shady side. In this way, even when the weather is very hot, he does not feel it to the same degree that people do who have not established his habits. Shade, especially in the summertime, is helpful to mental contemplation, to rest and repose of mind and body. But too often people who have been sick for a long time feel that the room should be darkened. This, instead of making for rest of mind and body, will bring about mental depression, and it often has the effect of inducing melancholia. Every disease of mind and body has its own particular psychology, and unless the physician is fully alive to this fact, he will make many mistakes in his efforts to effect cures. Let it once be fully understood that the causes of disease are of a psychological nature, and that it will only be through a real psychology which is able to perceive the nature of these causes and to know how to meet them in a thoroughly scientific, psychological way, that the real science of healing will be advanced. The study into the physical pathology and the morbid anatomy of disease has done far more to retard true healing than perhaps almost any or all other factors introduced into medicine. Too much time and attention have been given to the morbid and unreal side of life. What the world needs today is a far deeper insight and a more comprehensive knowledge as to how life can best be lived so that diseases may be avoided. We need to know first of all how to live, and the physicians of the future will pay far less attention to drug medication and other kindred things that they deem so necessary at the present time, and will devote their time to more natural ways of treating their patients. The treatment of the future, instead of filling the mind with fear, as too often it does at the present, will not only rob the mind of fear, but will give pleasure as well to the patient. For music and color will of a certainty supersede the present poisonous drug system. While there may be other things used in connection with them, yet they will form the fundamentals from which a new structure of health and healing shall rise. Each step in the unfolding of color to the human vision means an upward step in the development of humanity. There is a law of correspondence, wherein cuter changes symbolize changes in man's inner life. Nature is not to be viewed as something separate and apart from man's life. It is the same life that lives and moves in nature, that lives and moves and has its being in man. Nature symbolizes what man has been and what man is, and in man's fuller development, nature will still continue to keep the record. With the higher development, there will come a greater appreciation of everything that is beautiful, and this appreciation will have the effect of causing man to vibrate to a higher octave of being. The vibration thus set up in his own life will bring him in touch with nature's higher vibrations. Not only will he see with new eyes, but hear with new ears. For seeing and hearing are both indications of a progressive state of being. The man who closes his eyes to the beauties of nature will eventually be unable to perceive such beauties. The man who closes his ears to the melody, rhythm, and harmony of life will gradually lose what hearing he has. For unto every one that hath shall be given, and from him that hath not, even that he hath shall be taken away from him. He that hath eyes, let him see, and he that hath ears, let him hear. Through such seeing and hearing, greater desires and larger ideals will enter into life. For everything that is true in man's consciousness is there in order that it shall be realized. All inner truths are capable of outer expression. The beauties of color and music have for us 1,000 times more value than either eye hath seen or ear hath heard. It will be through fostering the love of color and seeing all there is to see in it that the new octave of color will come. First of all, it will be seen by the mind's eye. Later it will take on an outward manifestation. The rainbow is most assuredly a symbol of hope, and the double rainbow gives us the assurance that we may hope for a new octave of color, and that our hope shall be fully realized. Most people, at one time or another, have been thrilled and inspired by some glorious sunrise or sunset. Sometimes we feel as though we were almost in the presence of God, and we lose all desire to speak, caring only to drink in the beauty of the scene. This is not merely a passing incident, but it is one that the mind continues to retain. The writer has in mind a sunset that he can never forget, a sunset that stirred him to greater depths of feeling than any sermon he has ever heard. Surely that which can produce such a lasting effect upon the mind must also leave its impress upon the body. I believe that, as man becomes more attuned to nature, through the love of all that is beautiful, not only will his mind be benefited, but his whole being, soul, mind, and body, will be quickened and renewed. The trouble with us all today is that we are out of tune, that we are not adjusted in a harmonious way either to nature or to our fellow men. And it will be only through becoming adjusted that we can come into harmony with the universal spirit, because man works from that which is partial to that which is whole and complete. We know that plants and trees are constantly giving off something which is helpful to the life of man, and that man is, as constantly exhaling or giving out something that is beneficial to the growth of plants and trees. Without doubt, we are giving in a limited way, both consciously and unconsciously, not only to the tree and plant, but also to our fellow man as well. But are we giving to each other all that we might give? Does there exist that full reciprocity of giving and receiving that should be constantly going on between man and his fellow man? It seems as though this giving and receiving should become an ever-increasing thing in the life of man. But, in order to make it so, a conscientious effort toward a new and a better adjustment will prove necessary. Man can hope to enter into the kingdom of God only through the use of his love nature. In the kingdom of God, only that which is beautiful, that which is harmonious, that which is true can be said to exist. If he bring the best to it, he will receive the best from it. The spirit of love in man ever makes for oneness. Whatever we love we become one with, and there is at once set up a reciprocal giving and receiving, which makes quite as much for our own good as it does for the good of the person who is loved by us. This love should not be a selfish one wherein the thought uppermost is that of receiving, because all real receiving must come because of previous giving. An honest effort to appreciate the beauties of nature will bring to us far more than we could possibly hope to get through the lack of appreciation. The more we are able to see of good in others or of beauty in nature, the more we shall continue to see in both. Nature yields her secrets to those only who are in love with her. O pure of heart, thou needest not ask of me what this strong music in the soul may be, what, and wherein it doth exist, this light, this glory, this fair luminous mist, this beautiful and beauty-making power. Joy, virtuous lady, joy that ne'er was given, save to the pure, and in their purest hour, life and life's effluence, cloud at once and shower, joy, lady, is the spirit and the power, which wedding nature gives to us in dower, a new earth and new heaven, undreamt of by the sensual and the proud. Joy is the sweet voice, joy the luminous cloud we in ourselves rejoice, and thence flows all that charms or ear or sight, all melodies the echoes of that voice, all colors a suffusion from that light. There is a deep significance in the Bible statement about the kings and princes being clothed in purple and fine linen. Purple represented, at that time, the highest degree of color. It signified power and all that was highest in life. The fine linen was of purest white. It is the white that gives us all the colors. The white stands for purity, and the purple was its highest manifestation and represented spiritual power. The real prince or king only becomes so through overcoming, and all overcoming is the result of inner purity of mind and purpose, and the outer expression evidenced by power. Before one can be clothed in purple and fine linen, the battle of self-control must be fought and won. Solomon has said that, "He that rules his spirit is greater than he that taketh a city." For the real battle of life is not a warfare with others as much as it is a battle within oneself to overcome false thoughts and unreal emotions. A constant putting behind of the old, and as constant a pressing forward to that which is new. It is only in this way that one attains the real kingship and becomes conscious of lasting power. End of chapter.